In 1956, a seismic shift occurred in the British music landscape, one that would forever alter the course of popular music in the UK. Decca, a major player in the industry, had initially released products under Capitol's American banner. However, everything changed when Capitol decided to break free and partner with EMI, an existing British label. This move set off a chain reaction that would saturate the UK market with Elvis Presley's music. Decca, feeling the sting of this move, decided to strike back. They approached RCA, offering them a deal. If RCA signed with Decca, they could have their very own UK label. RCA agreed, and in March 1956, this partnership was set to take shape, though it wouldn't be immediate. This strategic move by Decca allowed RCA to flood the UK market with Elvis Presley's hits. Starting with Heartbreak Hotel and I Was the One in March 1956, Elvis's music began to dominate. It wasn't easy at first. It took 2 months for Heartbreak Hotel to crack the charts at number 2, but once it did, the momentum was unstoppable. By July 1956, Elvis had 3 singles in the UK top 20 simultaneously. Songs like Blue Suede Shoes and Hound Dog battled it out with his other hits, showcasing a relentless onslaught of Elvis music. This wasn't just about one artist, it was about a phenomenon. The market was saturated with Elvis singles, EPs, and LPs, all of which were incredibly popular. For HMV, the UK's leading record retailer, this meant a challenging period. With so much Elvis material available, it was tough to keep up demand without overwhelming consumers. Yet, despite the saturation, the public loved it. Elvis was everywhere, and his music was undeniably catchy and innovative. Other artists began to feel the heat. RCA, now with its own UK label, released singles that, while not as immediately successful as Elvis, still managed to chart respectably. Teddy Bear and Loving You, for example, reached number 3, showing that there was still room for other artists in the spotlight. The situation was reminiscent of what would happen with the Beatles a few years later, where independent labels and major labels alike scrambled to capitalize on a burgeoning phenomenon. The British music scene, however, was not ready to give in to American dominance. Wally Ridley, a veteran of the music industry, was skeptical. He believed that British musicians and singers would take time to match the quality of American rock and roll. Ridley stuck to what he knew, focusing on songs with strong melodies and heartfelt performances. He dismissed the idea of chasing after Elvis-style acts, believing that quality and sincerity would always sell. Amid this chaos, a young Tommy Steele emerged as Britain's answer to Elvis. Steele, a merchant seaman by day, became an unlikely rock star. His authenticity and down-to-earth persona resonated with the public. Unlike some of his contemporaries who tried too hard to emulate Elvis, Steele stayed true to himself. His music, while not as flashy, had a certain charm that connected with listeners. Despite initial skepticism from the BBC, Steele found his footing in the spotlight, becoming a beloved figure in British rock and roll. The BBC, however, was hesitant to embrace this new wave of music. Programs like 6.5 Special, hosted by Jack Good, struggled to find a place for rock and roll. Good, an Oxford graduate with a deep love for Shakespeare, found himself at odds with the BBC's reluctance to support the genre. Despite the challenges, Good recognized the fun and energy of rock and roll, even if he didn't always see its artistic merit. As the British music industry grappled with these changes, it became clear that the country was on the cusp of a new era. The arrival of Elvis and the subsequent push from RCA and other labels forced British musicians to evolve. While some, like Tommy Steele, found success by staying true to their roots, others were swept up in the tide of American influence. The result was a rich, dynamic period in British music history, one that would forever change the way music was made and consumed in the UK. In the 1950s, British youth found themselves captivated by a sound that was loud, energetic, and decidedly American British rock and roll. For many, artists like Tommy Steele, Terry Dene, and Cliff Richard embodied this new musical style. However, for Alan Bleasdale, a playwright with a love for rock and roll, British rock wasn't quite the same as the American version. While he admired artists like Tommy Steele, he never collected British rock records. To him, they just didn't match the American sound that he admired, like that of the legendary Elvis Presley. Bleasdale did buy one record by Lonnie Donegan and another by Frankie Vaughan, but it was more of a novelty than a serious musical pursuit. British rock fans had their own way of enjoying American stars. They would attend shows like the one where Jack Good tried to get Elvis Presley on his TV show, 6.5 Special. The story goes that Jack Good called Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, to see if Elvis would appear. Colonel Parker asked for a big sum of money, which Jack agreed to, but when Parker asked about paying Elvis, the amount jumped to $250,000 just for one show. It was a wild time, but Elvis never actually came to Britain. British musicians mostly stayed away from covering Elvis songs. It was risky, almost like inviting trouble. But one brave soul, Clinton Ford, decided to cover Old Shep. Ford was a folk, jazz, and country singer who loved the song. He recorded it for Oriole, a label that released affordable records with popular songs. Ford used a full band to give it a rock and roll feel, but the record company wanted something more commercial. Despite the challenges, his version made it to the charts. Clinton Ford even gave his royalties from Old Shep to a dog home, showing his good heart, but not everyone was so understanding. The Queen, it said, asked someone to turn off the radio when Old Shep was playing because her dog had gotten into trouble. Despite these fun stories, British fans didn't rush to buy cheap imitations of Elvis. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, tried to license Elvis products in Britain but found little interest. Brian Epstein, who later managed the Beatles, missed the boat on this one too. He didn't realize how big the British market could be for Elvis products. British fans did enjoy Elvis movies, though. The film Love Me Tender was a hit in the US but didn't do well in the UK. Fans in Britain had to see Elvis on film first, but even then, the movie Loving You was pulled after just 4 days because fans booed Elvis during the screenings. One fan wrote to a music magazine saying it was funny to see Elvis try to act, but he didn't like how he looked on screen. Despite these setbacks, Elvis's influence was powerful. It inspired a youth culture known as Teddy Boys, who wore long jackets and drainpipe trousers. Their behavior sometimes led to trouble, with fights and vandalism at cinemas. Parents were worried, but they still let their kids go see Elvis films, knowing the draw was too strong to ignore. While the British music scene had its own rock and roll sound, it was clear that the American original had a special magic. Elvis Presley was a revolutionary force, changing the way young people dressed, acted, and listened to music. Even if British fans didn't always copy Elvis exactly, his influence was undeniable. It set the stage for a new era of music and culture that would continue to grow and change in Britain and beyond. In the mid-1950s, a significant figure in music and film began making waves in both Britain and America, Elvis Presley. His energy and style captivated audiences, but not everyone was happy about it. In Britain, Lord Auckland spoke in the House of Lords about the kind of films being shown in cinemas, mentioning how some patrons were upset by the rock and roll movies featuring stars like Elvis. He suggested that local polls should decide what films are shown, advocating for more local control over cinema choices. This was an early call for independent local cinemas, where communities could have a say in what movies they wanted to see. Meanwhile, in Liverpool, the release of one of Elvis's films caused quite a stir. Lord Boothby, speaking on BBC's Any Questions, expressed alarm at how such fourth-rate films with fifth-rate music could affect society. He argued that these films threatened the values of civilization and believed it was time to ban such content. His comments reflected a broader concern among some older generations about the influence of rock and roll and its stars on young people. The world of entertainment was also buzzing with new talent. Jack Good launched ITV's Oh Boy, a lively music show that, despite its British twist, struggled to find homegrown talent comparable to American stars like Elvis. It was during this time that Jack Good discovered Cliff Richard, guiding him to shed his Elvis-like image and develop his own style. Cliff's journey illustrates how British artists of the era were influenced by American idols, but also sought to carve out their unique identities. Cliff Richard, along with other artists like Billy Fury, began to make their mark. Billy Fury, often seen as Britain's answer to Elvis, was known for his energetic performances and his willingness to push boundaries, sometimes to the dismay of more conservative audience members. His shows were lively, but not always well received by everyone. Elvis himself was navigating the pressures of fame and military service. In 1957, he had to report for a physical examination, which went smoothly, classifying him as one fit for service. However, Elvis, with the help of his manager Colonel Parker, managed to avoid immediate deployment, much to the dismay of his mother, Gladys, who feared for his safety. To keep his image intact and appease his fans, Elvis accepted a humorous gesture: 282 teddy bears sent by admiring fans. This act not only delighted his fans but also led to a song, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear, written specifically for him. This period also saw Elvis making appearances on Ed Sullivan's show, though there were some misunderstandings. Concerns were raised that Elvis was doing something inappropriate on live television, leading to restrictions on how he was filmed, focusing only on his upper body. The way Elvis was presented on television shows like Ed Sullivan's was carefully managed. The choice to film him from the waist up was partly due to these concerns, though it also resulted in an awkward appearance. Elvis's performance during this time was energetic but not always as polished as later portrayals might suggest. He was performing in front of a set designed to look like a record store, with the Jordanaires dressed in outfits that seemed out of place, creating an odd visual contrast. Elvis's influence stretched across the Atlantic, affecting not just music but fashion and culture. As he became more popular, he faced criticism but also admiration for his unique style and sound. His impact was profound, influencing countless artists who followed and changing the landscape of popular music forever. In both Britain and America, the arrival of Elvis Presley marked a significant shift in entertainment and culture. While some resisted his influence, others embraced it, leading to a new era in music and performance. Elvis's journey from a small town in Mississippi to becoming a global icon shows how one person's talent and charisma can change the world, even if some old guard members of society found it hard to accept.